thousands of beagles.
So loud you literally cannot hear yourself talk.
Raised in stacked metal cages.
I see my Maggie, that could have been hurt.
Is it scientific progress?
These therapies that come out of this research not only go on to benefit the dogs themselves, but also humans.
Or animal cruelty?
They never step outside. They never get a chance to go on a walk. They never have a kind touch.
This week on Open Record, unexpected allies.
Animals don't care who you vote for. They just want to stop being tortured in laboratories.
Target a massive Wisconsin farm.
Someone has to say, this is madness.
Where puppies are bred for the lab. From the Fox 6 studios, this is Open Record. I'm Brian Polson, and I'm joined, as always, by Open Record's executive producer, Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
And we are joined once again by Contact 6's Jenna Sachs. Hello, Jenna.
Hey there.
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
We are recording this episode on Wednesday, March 19th. As we record, a 59-year-old Wisconsin factory farm that breeds beagle puppies for scientific research is facing both criminal charges, possibly, and regulatory investigations. Animal rights groups have been trying to raise awareness of what happens at Ridgeland Farms about 30 miles west of Madison for years. Now, thanks to a rare legal maneuver, they appear to have the breeding operation on the ropes. And unexpected allies in Washington want to help them cut off the money supply that funds animal research. We're going to talk about all of that and more right after this.
We are back on Open Record. Ridgeland Farms, a commercial dog breeding operation west of Madison. So unlike other puppy mills, though, the dogs aren't headed to pet stores or people's houses. They are headed for science labs. Brian, how, we always ask, how did we get started? How did you start digging into this? What tipped you off?
Well, what's interesting is I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe a year or two ago, someone had reached out to me about this very thing, and they sent me video that these animal rights activists had gotten back in 2017, and I was interested, but I was in the middle of other things. And you know how sometimes you have projects and you go, I can't jump into that right now, and it went by the wayside. And more recently, I think around Christmas time this year, there was another person who reached out and said, there's stuff going on. There's just been a hearing on Ridgeland Farms. You've got to see this video. And I was like, I remember that. But as I looked further, there was a new development, and that is there had just been a hearing after an animal rights organization had petitioned for a special prosecutor to be appointed to look into criminal charges against Ridgeland Farms. And after that tip came in, the judge in Dane County actually agreed that there was probable cause, that crimes had been committed, and appointed a special prosecutor. And that's when I got involved in starting looking back at this. This goes back to 2017 when a group called Direct Action Everywhere, led by a man named Wayne Shung, he's a former Northwestern University law professor, they went inside Ridgeland Farms. They went in the middle of the night like a mission, and they took video cameras. They're wearing cameras on their heads. They had still cameras. They went inside to just document the conditions.
I assume they didn't have
place.
Permission, right?
They did not have permission. They snuck into the facility, and they told me that the door was unlocked. That being said, I mean, today there's barbed wire.
I was going to say,
the whole thing.
The video from your story showed the barbed wire.
But they didn't have permission to be there, and they knew they didn't have permission. This was intentional. They wanted to expose the world to what was going on inside this place. So they go inside, they get the video, and they take 3 animals with them. They took 3 of the dogs out of their cages, and they left. And in fact, there's video that they've published online where you hear the alarms going off in the facility, and they're sort of running out the back door. According to a criminal complaint that was there were charges filed several years later against these activists, and according to that criminal complaint, what's really interesting, we didn't talk about this in the story, the alarms go off, and the lead veterinarian, I think this is who it was, one of the people for the facility shows up and comes to check the place out. And what he sees is there's a door that's open, and there's a couple of black garbage bags by one of the doors. But he doesn't see anything else amiss. And he doesn't really know what's happened, thinks, well, maybe somebody from security or something else tripped the alarms, and then he leaves. The whole time the activists were there, they had the dogs, they were outside keeping quiet. And then when he leaves, they go back in and finish the job. And I talked to Wayne Shung about that, and he said it was a really intense moment because they're thinking all of this work and prep has been put into exposing this place, and it might all go downhill right here. This world may never find out about Ridgeland Farms. Well, the guy goes back home and they leave with the animals. They publish their video, and here we are today.
And later they were charged with burglary. Is that right?
That's right. It took 4 years, but the Dane County District Attorney charged 3 people, Wayne Chung and 2 others who went in, with burglary and theft. These animals are technically property under the law. They were worth, I think they said in the criminal complaint, about $1,200 each. So they were charged with trespassing or burglary for entering the place without permission, and then theft for taking the animals without permission. So that took 4 years to charge. Another 3 years before the case finally is about to go to trial. And these activists, while they're charged with crimes, felonies, in fact, they wanted the trial.
And why is that?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
They
most
wanted
wouldn't-
attention to this. They
Yeah.
wanted to draw attention, and they felt they had a legal argument. Their argument was that under the law, you imagine this. If a house is burning down and there's a dog inside, you don't have the owner's permission to go in, but you certainly have the right to go in and rescue that animal. No one's going to charge you with burglary for it, right? Now, could you take that animal and leave and run away? That's a different story. But their argument, their legal theory was that is a rescue that's allowed under the law. These dogs are being harmed. We're going in to rescue them. Whether or not that was going to stand up in court, they wanted their moment. They wanted to put Ridgeland Farms on trial. And when Ridgeland Farms went to the DA and said, we're getting complaints, we're getting what they said were death threats, we just want to drop the case.
I was going to say, I don't think they would necessarily want to have all that information on public record, right? Going in and all the folks at Ridgeland having to testify. It just might draw more attention.
And that's, I'm sure what they looked at is it's been 7 years since this happened. Business is going about as usual there. The worst thing for them is probably for this to get lots of public attention. And so they said, can you just drop the case and let's move on? Well, the animal rights activists, Wayne Chung, and a group called Dane for Dogs, who we're going to hear from later in this podcast, they said, well, we're going to turn the tables. They actually said, if the prosecutor in Dane County won't charge Ridgeland Farms with animal cruelty, we're going to go around the prosecutor. And they filed a petition for the judge to directly charge Ridgeland Farms with crimes by appointing a special prosecutor from somewhere else.
What does that mean when you say they appoint a special prosecutor?
So the Dane County District Attorney is the one who's responsible for determining if crimes should be charged as such, and if there's probable cause, and if they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The Dane County District Attorney apparently wasn't meeting with them, wouldn't listen, wouldn't do that. But there is an avenue under the law for citizens to petition for criminal charges without the district attorney at all. So that's what Dane for Dogs and Wayne Chung did. They filed that petition, said, we'd like you to charge Ridgeland Farms directly by appointing a prosecutor from somewhere else to come in and look at the evidence and determine if there should be charges. The judge held a hearing in October. It's an extraordinary hearing. Hours and hours worth of testimony. Now, it's interesting because it's a one-sided hearing. This type of hearing under the law does not involve the ability for Ridgeland Farms to testify or to cross-examine. And they actually went to the Court of Appeals to try to say, hey, we should be able to give our side in this. Under this stage of things, the court said, no, you don't have a right to that. So there were whistleblowers, former employees who came and testified. And I really think that's what made this story and made this case was these whistleblowers who are former employees of Ridgeland Farms, non-veterinarians, they are not licensed to do animal surgeries, came in and testified that they routinely performed these really brutal so-called cherry eye surgeries where there's beagles are prone to, I don't know if it's infection or irritation of this particular gland in the eye. And so they would go in and, on an almost daily basis and cut that gland out. But these employees said they were instructed by the supervisors, the veterinarians at the facility to do this. They didn't have their own license to do these kind of surgeries, and they weren't using anesthesia. So these are painful, bloody surgeries. It was really hard to listen to some of the testimony as they described just the one wasn't in the story, but there's one of the former employees who says, when we were done, we would just put the animal back in the cage, and sometimes their partner animal would come over and just lick the blood off.
Oh.
I mean, that's how graphic this was. And they testified to this. It was after that hearing that the judge decided there was enough evidence for potential criminal charges, and she appointed La Crosse County prosecutor DA Jim Grinke, who is currently looking at the case.
You mentioned that Ridgeland couldn't really present their side in this court hearing. You mentioned in your story, though, that this is medical research, and that has been useful in the past for creating drugs like insulin. Not necessarily this farm, but other animal testing.
Ridgeland didn't speak to us. They have spoken to the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection in a recorded meeting that we've listened to. They've also, Richard Van Domelen, the lead veterinarian, did recently speak at a veterinary examining board hearing. So they've sort of made their case. And in their case, they've said this is a legal this is lawful research. The breeding of animals is legal. Research on animals is legal. They know it's controversial. They said they've been targeted by activists for years, but this is the dogs they are breeding and the research they are doing, because they do some research at Ridgeland, they say, and the research that's done by the facilities they sell the dogs to, they say that helps in things like research on cardiology that is good for dogs, but also eventually potentially for humans, that it is good for cancer research. And others that are in the field of animal research have said that, I think they gave the example that insulin was discovered through research on dogs. So there's certainly people who are saying that there is good reason for this, but when you talk to the people, and then when you look at some of this video, I think their biggest concern is the care of the animals, the way they're being treated on the way to have a facility that houses thousands of dogs that aren't getting daily attention. Yeah. The law requires there to be positive human contact on a daily basis. And I know Dane for Dogs did the math on this when they looked at 3,200 dogs and how many that is per day. And if you just spent 5 minutes with them per day, how many hours that would be and how many employees that would require to be able to do that. They don't have nearly that many. I think they said they have like a total of 16 employees on staff, and only a few of them are actually doing socialization with the dogs. And what that means, socialization, is another interesting question, because Ridgeland Farms didn't want to answer that when DATCAP asked them about it. They said they thought it was an unfair question. So what does socialization mean to you and me? I think of taking a dog on a walk, getting them outside, getting some fresh air. To them, it might simply mean going to the cage, giving them a quick pet, checking them out for injuries, and then moving on. Is that socialization under the law? That's one of the questions.
Yeah, I think that one of the most troubling parts is, and it kind of just keeps unfolding. It's like an onion, and the video from inside there, you think, okay, aside from the surgeries that these former employees said that they had to do, it's just the sheer number of animals and the cages, and just, they're in there.
That noise.
By twos, that stand-up you shot was with the sound, because you said it's faint, and then the audio, and all you hear is it, and it's haunting almost.
It's constant.
Yeah.
From 500 feet away, you get there, and all of a sudden there's birds chirping in the air, and then you hear the dogs, and you can't stop hearing the dogs at that point.
Yep.
And it's going. I don't know if it's like that 24 hours a day. It must be. They don't know if it's day or night. There's lights on inside. They don't have any windows.
Yeah.
It's like, I hate to say it, it's like Vegas, where you never know if it's day or night, except it's not Vegas.
Yeah.
It's very different. I do want to talk about this. I want to take a break, but we're talking about, this has been going on for nearly 60 years. But the heat's getting turned up on Ridgeland Farms right now. State inspectors have recently been turning up the heat. And we're going to talk about some of that right after this.
Welcome back to Open Record. First, a judge appoints a special prosecutor to consider criminal charges. Now the State Veterinary Examining Board is turning up the heat. Brian, what is happening with that?
So there are multiple investigations going on with Ridgeland Farms right now. There's the criminal investigation. There's also, in fact, we know DEA was on site, I think, just a few weeks ago. We don't know why yet DEA was there, but we have received body camera video showing them donning their hazmat suits and the whole thing as they were on site. But the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection is responsible for inspecting dog breeding facilities in Wisconsin. USDA does inspections of research facilities. So they've both been doing inspections. We know that last year, even with all the attention that was being focused on Ridgeland Farms, inspections by DATCAP twice found possible violations. They found problems with drainage of the dog waste that literally falls through the cage, that it was stagnant in some areas, creating obviously a terrible smell, but other hazards. They found injuries to some of the dogs, like their paws were showing injuries that might have been related to the surface that they're walking on that hadn't been logged in any other records by Ridgeland Farms. And they found that the dogs weren't necessarily getting that daily positive human contact. And that led to the back and forth between the two sides in a meeting in December over, I think DATCAP's inspector asked, what do you think is appropriate socialization? And Ridgeland Farms responded, that's an unfair question. You need to tell us what you think it is before we'll answer. It was a really remarkable conversation. So those investigations are all going on, and the Veterinary Examining Board is investigating the licenses of Dr. Richard Van Dommelen and 2 other veterinarians there. Those investigations are all ongoing as well.
Did we learn anything interesting from former or current employees? Did they speak at all in those hearings?
They didn't talk to Fox 6. I did reach out to one of the ones who testified. His name is Matthew Reich, and what he told me was what he testified to in court is what he wants to leave for the record for now. We did not know about the 8 other employees until recently that the Veterinary Examining Board had talked to. They interviewed 8 current employees of Ridgeland Farms, and each of those 8 employees added further detail to those cherry eye surgeries that are still being done to this day. Now, we talked in the story about another really graphic and heartbreaking procedure, devocalization, where they go in and they literally cut out a dog's vocal cords so they can't make so much noise. A customer who buys them for a lab experiment maybe doesn't want the barking going on all day. These employees talked about doing those surgeries, those removals without any anesthesia, just holding a dog down. I think they said they would give them a paralytic agent that would, essentially force them to, they wouldn't have to hold them down any further, but they weren't giving them pain relief. It does say in the records we've seen, Ridgeland is claiming they haven't done those surgeries since 2018. But these employees that talked to the Veterinary Examining Board investigator said they've been doing these cherry eye surgeries right up until this day. They've been doing them. And again, these are employees of the facility who are not licensed veterinarians doing intricate surgical procedures on the eye gland of an animal.
Man, I just have so many questions. Can we just back up 1 second? So where are they coming from, and how do they get to Ridgeland?
So Ridgeland is breeding them. I mean, they're doing the breeding of the
yeah.
animals there.
Okay,
they have, they have whelping rooms, and they have all these other. So they're breeding the animals there.
Okay.
The question really, I think, is where they're going.
Where they go next.
Where they go after. And we don't know because, Ridgeland Farms is a private business.
Yep.
And so they don't report where they sell or who they sell their dogs to or where. What we do know is Dane County has become this like hotbed of animal research and dog research in particular. You have on the one hand, Ridgeland Farms that's breeding all these animals and doing some of the research themselves. And then you have the university system. They don't use very many dogs anymore. I think the 2023 report I saw from USDA showed maybe around 60 or 70 dogs at UW Madison. But the really big a dog researcher in that area is LabCorp. It's a private company that is essentially a lab for hire, and drug companies will hire them to do research. And according to their USDA report, I think they have something like 4,000 dogs in their possession, and 2,700 or so of them have been used in experiments, some of them painful experiments. LabCorp did not respond to my request for a comment other than with a 1-paragraph statement that assured us that their treatment of animals is ethical and that the work they are doing is beneficial to research that helps humans, but they wouldn't talk otherwise. So we don't know if LabCorp's dogs are coming from Ridgeland, if they're coming from another major beagle breeder called Marshall. We don't know where they're coming from exactly. We do know there's a lot of them being bred in Dane County and a lot of them ending up in research in Dane County.
Why beagles?
They're docile. They're sweet.
Yeah, you mentioned holding them for the
Yeah.
vocal cord surgery. They must be like a good patient.
And when I say that, it sounds like, well, Brian, is that your impression? Is that your opinion? No, this is actually stuff that's been documented for years.
Yeah.
We talked in our story about way back
That
to
was
the
fascinating.
1950s and 60s.
Totally, yeah.
And the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission was doing a lot of radiation experiments. They commissioned a book. They funded the publication of a book all about why beagles make great research animals. And one of the things they said in there is that it's their short hair or medium hair, their medium size, and most of all, their temperament. They're non-aggressive. They won't fight back. So you can do a lot to a beagle and they won't bite you. They won't bite the researcher. They won't get aggressive. So their very vulnerability is why they've made such great research models, according to the things we've read.
So we're all used to this very divided political landscape right now. Not a lot of issues will unite liberal activists and conservatives, but this is one of them.
It is. It's one of the things I found really fascinating because as all this stuff is going on in Wisconsin about Ridgeland, there were hearings in Washington in Congress. A congressional committee held a hearing all about funding for animal research, and there are conservative groups, fiscal conservative groups, groups that are anti-animal testing that have been, and one of them in particular, the White Coat Waste Project. You may remember here in Wisconsin, there was controversy 7 or 8 years ago about the Zablocki Medical Center was tied to research on beagles, very painful graphic research on beagles, and then they ended that afterwards. It was White Coat Waste Project that exposed that research through open records requests. White Coat Waste recently testified in Washington saying that they have proposed to DOJ, which is going around cutting all this money, right? They've proposed $20 billion in cuts in animal research, particularly because of this kind of research on dogs and cats. So you have these conservative groups that are aligned with otherwise maybe traditionally more liberal activist groups, and they have the same goal in mind, and that is to end experimentation on animals.
Are there alternatives to using animals when it comes to testing?
There are some, but I it sounds to me from the people I've talked to like that stuff that's still in develop. There is technology called organ on a chip, as an example, where they can actually take a chip and mimic human organs and do experiments to that chip to try to determine how maybe a drug or a therapy will work. Others say that it's just that science isn't there yet. It needs investment. It needs development. But there are certainly people who say that if the investment, if the money shifts over to that sort of thing and away from animal research, they would like to see that because they think that they want, that this is an old technology that ought to go away. One of the things we heard repeatedly was that animal research in particular is not particularly reliable for developing new human biologics or therapies. 95% of the tests that are done on animals do not lead to any sort of human biologic or medication or surgical procedure or anything that could help. So there's a lot of what they would say is wasted money on that research.
We're hearing a lot in the news lately about federal cuts in what DOJ is doing. Yeah. Would DOJ target this area?
Well, that's certainly what White Coat Waste Project and some of these others want to see. They would like to see the government cut that funding. And I think certainly a lot of these groups would say, if you cut off the money supply, you cut off the need for breeders like Ridgeland Farms. That's what I think where the alignment really comes in, is if you cut funding on one hand, you may cut the need for those animals. But a lot remains to be seen on that. I do want to bring, we've got a guest from Dane for Dogs. Rebecca Robinson is the president of Dane for Dogs, and they have been involved in this fight now for 7 or 8 years. We're going to bring her in and talk to her more about all of this right after the break. And we are back on Open Record, and we have a special guest joining us today is Rebecca Robinson with Dane for Dogs. Rebecca, thank you for being here on Open Record.
Thank you for having me.
So you've heard us talking for the last 20 or so minutes, but I want to take a step back and just ask, what is Dane for Dogs? How did it get started?
Yeah, Dane for Dogs is a nonprofit based out of Dane County, Wisconsin. Our mission is to end the breeding, sale, and use of dogs and cats for painful and distressing experimentation.
Why is Dane County? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, yeah, how it formed. Go ahead. I'll let you
I was just going to say how we formed was we learned about what was happening at Ridgeland Farms after the DXE activists went into Ridgeland Farms and rescued the 3 dogs. And so we were just a group of local friends who decided to get together and figured we should try and do something about this.
Why do you think that Dane County is a hotbed for these dog breeding facilities?
It's such a great question. And I've asked myself that so many times. The only thing that I can think is that there's just a self-licking ice cream cone situation going on here where the breeders are here, the experimenters are here, and they just kind of rotate dogs as necessary.
From the very beginning of this, one of the things I've wondered is we know there's these thousands of dogs at Ridgeland Farms. We know there's private laboratories in Dane County. We know that there is the university. Do we know for sure that that's where the dogs are going? Do we have any idea? Do you have any idea where these dogs are going from Ridgeland Farms? Where are they selling their dogs?
We do have a buyer's list, and we're going to be releasing that soon. And our plan is actually for this summer. If those buyers have not yet dropped Ridgeland Farms, and if Ridgeland Farms is still in business, you will start to see protests across the country at some of these businesses.
So we know this open rescue happened in 2017. What has your organization been doing in the years since then?
We started with a ballot initiative in Mount Horeb to try and shut down Ridgeland Farms. Unfortunately, that did not succeed. It was kind of a David and Goliath situation where, again, we were just a small ragtag group of friends taking on a multi-million-dollar industry. And then we started and moved into Spring Green, where there was another research puppy mill going in. The residents there asked us for help. After that, we started moving towards ballot initiatives and passing legislation as these communities saw what was going on. The neighboring communities saw Spring Green get sued for denying a conditional use permit for a research puppy mill. So Richland Center was actually the first city in the country to pass a complete ban on dog and cat experimentation. And so that was really groundbreaking. Since then, we've passed 5 more. In cities around Wisconsin. We also helped adopt out 6 Invigo beagles when Invigo was shut down in 2022. And then, of course, we've been busy with the special prosecutor and the vet board and the DATCAP inspections.
So Invigo was a facility, we didn't talk about it in our main story, but it was in Virginia, and the U.S. Department of Justice investigated there, ended up, I think there was like a $35 million fine, correct me if I'm wrong, and ultimately they shut down. Those beagles were adopted out. Do you see any similarities, differences? What can you tell me about Invigo versus Ridgeland Farms?
Ridgeland Farms is undoubtedly worse. The conditions at Invigo were bad, but at least those dogs were on solid flooring and they had access to the outdoors. So they could see outside, they could actually get fresh air. They were also housed in large groups of dogs. The dogs at Ridgeland Farms are kept in tiny cages, stacked on top of each other. They never get outside. They never get sunlight. It's really horrific conditions at Ridgeland Farms, even before you take into consideration the whistleblower testimony about the cherry eye surgery without pain relief, the devocalization, and then the recent employees coming forward and saying they're also doing dental extractions without pain relief.
What you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Talk about the petition that you guys did for the special prosecutor.
So Wayne Shung, who was one of the activists in 2017 who entered Ridgeland Farms and rescued those 3 dogs, he approached Dane for Dogs and said, hey, let's try this kind of groundbreaking petition for a special prosecutor. And so he put us in contact with the Animal Activist Legal Defense Project. We brought in our partners Alliance for Animals as well. And the 4 organizations got together and put together this petition for a special prosecutor, essentially saying that Dane County District Attorney Ozon has failed to prosecute animal cruelty. We have provided him with so much evidence over the years of the animal cruelty that's happening at Ridgeland Farms. He has failed to prosecute. We need the government to step in and appoint a special prosecutor who will actually investigate and potentially prosecute Ridgeland Farms.
When I interviewed Wayne for this story, he said that was like, he didn't use the term Hail Mary, but I got the sense like this was a last-ditch effort. This was a shot because you had the criminal case against Wayne and his colleagues that was essentially going to be the arena. Even though they were the defendants, they really wanted this to go forward so that this could be brought into the public light. Then Ridgeland Farms backs out and says, just drop the case. We want it to go away. And Wayne and Dane for Dogs decides to go this route. Did you expect it to have the success that it's had, or was this like, it's the last thing we can try?
We have definitely tried so many things before this, but I was optimistic. I felt like our case was so strong. I had met Matt Reich, one of the former employees of Ridgeland Farms, back in 2018. We had had a meeting and he had told me the exact same story that he told on the stand now. At the time, he was too worried to come forward and asked me to keep his story confidential, so we did. But I knew that if he would be willing to come forward, we could have a really strong case. And then, of course, we also had Scott Gilbertson, who was willing to come forward and testify as well. Those 2 whistleblowers talking about what they had seen directly under oath, testifying what they had done, what they had seen, and what they had witnessed. It was incredibly powerful. And I thought, that combined with the DATCAP inspection reports that showed repeated violations over the years, as well as the footage from the activists in 2017, I thought this was an incredibly strong case. And it seemed very likely to me that a reasonable judge would decide to appoint a special prosecutor, as Judge Lamford did.
Rebecca, you touched on local ordinances earlier. Are you aware of anything going on the state level, any state legislation?
We've had state legislators reach out because they are very concerned about what they're seeing and what they're hearing about what's happening at Ridgeland Farms. So yes, we are working with a bipartisan group of state legislators on potential state legislation.
You were talking about those whistleblowers that came forward and they testified. It was an extraordinary hearing to hear them give that level of detail. And when I step back and I think about this, this has been going on there for decades. This isn't actually anything new, except for the fact that nobody could see what was going on inside. So Wayne goes in with direct action everywhere and they get this video. And it's the first time you can see inside this facility, the stacks of cages and the way the animals are sort of barking in that sort of desperate, it's just deafeningly loud. But then even in that video, you still can't see what's being done to the dogs other than the being kept in cages in, false light without windows, which is hard enough to see in its own. But then they speak to these surgeries that none of us can see. And can you talk about sort of the brutality of what they described?
It's incredibly cruel. It's cruel not just to the dogs, but it's also cruel to ask the employees or expect them to do this. These are hourly wage workers, and when your boss is telling you this is how it's done, you listen and you go and do that, right? And we've seen this happen time and time again at Ridgeland Farms, where the authority figures are telling these employees, this is what you do, whether it's cherry eye surgery, whether it's devocalization, whether it's dental extractions. And what these employees are going through, I mean, Matt Reich has testified he's had nightmares. He's really had a lot of struggles based on what he saw and experienced there. He was there for 5 years. And oftentimes these employees go into the situation not knowing. They don't know what's going on in there any more than we would know what's going on in there. And so they find themselves in this situation. They don't want to leave these dogs alone without at least the comfort and the care that they are trying to provide. So they really find themselves stuck in a tough situation, and we have a lot of compassion for them.
The number one question we got from viewers who watched this story, we put up a QR code, said, if you have a question, let us know. We got a lot of comments. We got some questions, but the number one question was, what can we do? What can I do to help in this situation? From your organization's perspective, what do you say to those viewers who feel like they want to do something?
Go to our website, go to danefordogs.org, sign up to join our mailing list. On our website, we also have a tab called Action, where you can take action. We have a list of things that we're asking people to do. You can also follow us on Facebook, and we will continually keep you informed as the story changes.
Rebecca, when I think about animal research, I think about rats, I think about mice. Why did you choose to focus solely on dogs?
We as a society love our dogs. There are dog parks. There aren't mice parks, right? So as a society, I think people who own dogs, who love dogs, who care for dogs, who bring them into their family, they understand these are sentient beings. These are animals with personalities and who we love and we bring into our families. And so we believe that society is ready for this.
You have said you see parallels between the way dogs are treated and other animals as well, though. Is that right?
Yes. So Dane for Dogs focuses on dogs and cats because that's where we believe society is at. But of course, the arguments against dog and cat experimentation apply across species.
How do you feel about the technology that we're hearing is out there in terms of, organ on a chip or other things? Do you feel like the science is there to get beyond animal research?
I think the science is incredibly important in terms of having replacements, but I think it's also important to recognize that, again, we as a society have determined there are limits on what we are willing to do. We don't experiment on non-consenting humans. We don't experiment on children. There are limits. Even if we could push science incredibly forward, there are ethical limits that we as a society have agreed to. And so I think when we start to talk about what we're willing to do, a lot of times you'll hear animal experimenters say that this is a necessary evil. And I think it's important to recognize that we choose. We are making a choice as a society about what we're willing to accept and what we aren't. So the alternatives are important. I'll leave that to the scientists to determine whether they can replace the animal models or not. But what I would say is that even if the science and the replacement technology isn't completely up to par, I think we should still examine this from an ethical perspective, as well as from the realistic perspective that the animal models are not particularly effective anyways. It's not like we have this fantastic gold standard that is giving us really useful data. We have a limited model in terms of dogs that are being used that's not providing us with great data anyways. So I think it's important to weigh the pros and cons, but ultimately at the end of the day, it is an ethical issue. And we as a society get to decide if this is something we want to allow or not.
You have so many of these investigations that are ongoing right now. There's the DATCAP investigation, there's the Veterinary Board investigation, there's the criminal investigation. With all of that, what do you think is the next shoe to drop here?
We don't have a good feel on the timelines for any of these. A lot of this is unprecedented. So as far as I know, the special prosecutor timeline, that's really up to DA Grinke. I don't think there's any in terms of like statutory limitations on when it has to be done by. I do know that he is looking into it. He appears to be motivated, and I believe he's building a strong case. So that's important, and we don't want to rush him. He should take his time. He's going up against a multi-billion-dollar industry, really. So that's important. And as far as DACAP regulatory compliance and then the vet board, again, we're expecting these meetings to continue, but we don't have determinate timelines.
Rebecca Robinson, Dane for Dogs, thank you so much for being a guest here on Open Record.
Thank you.
And we will go off the record when we come right back. And it is time for us to go off the record. This is the part of the podcast where we get a little more casual and have a little fun by answering a question or two that Sarah has that we know nothing about. So Tell us, Sarah, what do you have in store this week?
This may cause me to gag a little bit.
That's a great tease. Well, I'm excited now. Okay.
There's a dentist who he's saying that, well, I guess maybe I'll just start with the question. How often do you replace your toothbrush?
Oh, that is a good question.
Well, I thought my dentist told me you only have to do it like every 6 months or so, unless you get sick. So
that is the next step of my question.
Okay, well, before you go there, I it's funny because I was one of those bad people. I would have a toothbrush for like 2 years.
No.
But then I got one of those.
The bristles are all like this.
Then I got
like,
no. My sons used to be like that because when he was young, he would just like
that's what all of our toothbrushes are like that.
And you would
flat.
No.
Or you would just like.
But
chew on it.
I ended up getting one of those the Sonic toothbrushes, and so they like gives you like a when it's time, then it gives you a little notice, then it's time to replace the.
Okay.
I go a little longer than that because I think they're just trying to sell more.
Wait, what is the notice? Because I have a Sonic toothbrush.
And it'll beep, and there's a light that says and it's got a picture of
He has the next.
He has
the next generation.
Mine's an old Sonic toothbrush.
I got one of the high-tech newer, state of the art.
That's a
but
dental flex.
I always feel like they set that at a time when they want it's too early and they want to sell more toothbrushes.
Yeah.
So I let it go a little longer.
Okay.
Right. I mean, as long as you're keeping it in like a sanitary place and it's not getting dropped on the floor. Like
I never thought about the sick thing. Though.
Okay, well that was was the story they were talking about. Even though it says there's a very low risk of a person reinfecting themselves, it wouldn't hurt to toss it out. I don't know.
Wouldn't hurt.
I got this advice like as recently as last month.
Okay.
They were saying you should just switch it when you get
I have
better.
never thrown mine out. I mean, I am an
me,
old woman at this point, and I have never thrown my toothbrush out after I was sick.
Really?
To get a new one. Ever.
Oh, I always do. Because like the pediatricians always say, make sure you throw out their toothbrush after they get
Why do I feel like though that like Jenna does all the things that she's told by the doctor and she's on top of it and I'm just not.
She gets those well-checked sheets and she's like,
I change my bed sheets. We've had this conversation before. But no,
I went home and washed my bed sheets. I did. I just felt like I need new sheets.
I've been changing them more out of shame. It shamed me into changing my sheets.
Just in case I ask again.
Right.
You can be like, I do it. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. But I mean, I've never. So any illness or like big ones like that knock you on your butt?
Not a cold. But I mean, if you're getting strep throat for sure. And then we had pneumonia at our house. So definitely got pneumonia.
If I make out with someone with COVID, then yes.
Skirt.
Just hit no. I mean, but you think about like COVID would be something you'd go, oh, and you'd have it on your toothbrush and not even think twice about it. I didn't.
All of those years. I mean, not any more than I would regularly.
We're very safe at our house. Like my kids even have their own toothpaste tube, so we're not sharing germs from the toothpaste tube.
Yes, we all have. Yes, we all have separate toothpaste tubes as well.
So that's something
interesting. Okay. No, the things that haven't crossed my mind. I'm not a germaphobe, and so I guess I don't think about it. But if you start thinking about it, then you go, maybe I should start doing those things.
I don't know if you're like me though, but I take a lot of pride when my dentist tells me I have good oral hygiene. Like, it makes me feel so good. I'm like, yes, thank you.
But also when they go, oh, how often do you floss? And I floss most days. It doesn't matter. I could say I floss every day, or I could say I floss once a week.
They do know.
They're still going to jab that floss in there, and I'm still going to bleed.
Right.
I was going to say that's
like a crazy.
That's the thing
person.
Is that you're answering how many times you floss, and they're like, "I see you're bleeding." Gums
and
don't
they're
lie.
like, "I'm sorry, I need to put gauze in your mouth because you're."
I think though that. I mean, I like when the dentist says, oh, you're doing really well too, but I have a really nice dentist. He's a super nice guy. And sometimes I think he's just saying it to make me feel good because he knows I keep coming back.
Right.
And then I'm like, maybe he's just really nice and maybe my teeth suck, but he's being really nice about it. I don't know.
I know. I like when they're like, "Oh, do you drink coffee?" And I was like, "Don't you dare attack my coffee drinking."
Yes, I drink
yes,
coffee.
yes, sir.
That's why I use a sonic toothbrush.
Well, okay. So another thing that might seem like floss when you bite into it. Kim Murphy yesterday, Fox 6 anchor, posted one word as a status little update. All it said was celery, period.
Ugh.
So all I did was write down the word celery.
In a good or a bad way?
To be determined. So I opened up the comments and it was like, some people were like, it goes good with almost everything. This person called it the devil's food. This one says, if you like to chew hair. Great diced in soup. This woman just had a dream about celery. So
if it's cooked,
to
I
the
might be
seasoning,
able to
yes.
eat
To
it, but-
eat, no. So like celery salt or whatever. So people are talking about Bloody Marys or ants on a log. So how do you feel about celery?
I have strong negative feelings.
Really?
Same.
About celery.
I think it's
The
trash.
texture
I was gonna-
thing.
Okay.
I once gave it to my kids, and they said, "This isn't a real food."
It's really it's a base for food. It's not
It's
really
a
food.
catalyst to bring
Right.
things into
Like
your
I mean,
mouth.
ants on a log for kids. It's real popular. It's easy.
It just
Peanut butter's
ruins the
delicious.
peanut butter and the raisins.
Yeah,
This-
right. Well, and
Too stringy.
if I'm gonna eat celery, I'm so anal about it. I'll take that like the edge of a knife and peel the back off to get all those like those things, the little strings or whatever.
yeah.
Isn't it all strings? Like the whole thing is string.
Yeah, but the big ribs in the back.
I
so
will
at
tell
least
you
it's a little...
because of that, one thing you do not want to do with celery, don't throw a bunch of it down the garbage disposal.
Oh.
You will ruin your garbage
Does it
disposal.
really?
Oh yeah, I had.
Well, it's like ropes.
It's not good for your garbage. So don't do
tangled
that.
up.
But it's something now this is going to take this to the next level. We eat a lot of celery actually. I like to chop it up and have it to give you crunch in certain things like egg salad. It gives just a little bit of crunch.
A little crunch.
And I like that. But the other thing
I'd rather
is
put pickles in there, but
Agreed.
yes.
I usually do, peanut
He
butter. I
doesn't
think it's a
like
great.
pickles, yeah.
No, I don't like
Yeah,
pickles.
that's right.
I think it's a great venue or vessel for peanut butter. I like that.
Okay.
But the thing that my wife does that I never knew anyone would do is to keep it fresh longer. She will put it in a sealed container and then she fills that container with water.
I've seen
Yes.
people do
And that actually
Okay.
works really well.
I've seen that at bars where they could pull it out for their Bloody Marys, but
I'm not
But
sure I
I-
could think of another food that's as polarizing though as celery.
it stinks. It smells horrible.
What?
Oh,
What
it
celery
stinks.
are you getting? It's like it's a completely non-smelling,
No,
almost tasteless
and
food.
okay, I honestly think this is
Man.
gonna like rabbit hole, but like I got COVID at one point
From celery?
No, from kissing someone and then not changing my toothbrush. No, but like I ended up getting like it was almost like a post-COVID or like a long COVID symptom of like olfactory nerves that got jacked up. And celery was one of those things where I smelled it and I was like gagging. It's a horrible smell.
Well, but that was related to your stuff getting all
Fine.
messed
I
up. Right?
PTSD.
Regular celery does not
I
smell
still
bad.
hate
I don't
it stinks.
think.
very, very much.
You know
I've
who
tried it
eats-
as an adult, seeing if it changed.
No, it
Still
doesn't.
dislike
My
it.
kids don't like it either. And you know who eats bags of celery? I don't know if he still does, but I'd walk back in the weather office and I was like, Rob Haswell is just eating stalks of
Just straight
celery.
celery.
Like,
You know who likes celery? Stalkers. No. See, I can't say that because I'm the one who I like celery, so that'd be bad.
So that's me.
But no, I it's funny because I'm the one who doesn't like the pickles and the whatever,
Yeah,
but I do.
but
I'm
hey.
a fan of celery.
so you're extra polarizing.
I am, I guess. Yeah. I feel like it's one of those things you can eat that gives you that sensation of crunch without getting a lot of calories, but you put a little something on top of it and it's
I'd rather eat
good.
shoe leather.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'll take your celery instead. Boy, I didn't think we could talk about celery that long, but we
Wow.
did. Was that something else?
Kim's
was
Yeah.
great.
Very clever.
Thanks, Kim.
But did she wait? Did she ever say if
I
she
don't know.
liked it
I
or
don't
not?
think she ever like commented on
She
her own
just
thing.
said
All it
celery.
literally said was celery.
Celery.
Period.
So the mystery continues. We
Yeah,
don't know if Kim
I
Murphy-
might have to follow up with her today. But when I saw it,
So
I
she
said,
never responded to any of those comments.
This one says celery when you have that sudden urge to bite into water with hair in it.
I mean, it's not wrong. Even though I said I like it, I don't like celery by itself. It's got to be you're right. It's what you dip it in. If you put it in a bunch of cheese, I mean, come on, it can't be that
Okay.
bad, right?
Well,
Anyway, all right, we'll wrap things up when we come right back.
The Fox 6 investigators, Milwaukee's most experienced investigative team. Honored, trusted, respected.
It's not just about telling a story,
It's about making positive change in our community.
holding the powerful accountable
You're just a piece of
by helping the powerless.
And exposing what you have a right to know. Not really sure why no one wants to talk about it.
The FOX6 Investigators.
We are Milwaukee's investigative team.
Because you matter.
That is all the time we have this week for Open Record. If you have a topic you would like us to discuss here on the podcast or an issue you think we should investigate for Fox 6 News, send us an email to fox6investigators@fox.com. This was another good one, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you to
great.
Sarah Smith, our executive producer, to our Contact 6 reporter, Jenna Sachs, to our editor, Dave Machuda, and to the man behind the video switcher today, that is Fox 6's Tim Primo, and of course, our chief photographer, Cale Zimney. With that, I'm Brian Polson. We'll be back next week.